Welcome to the Warrior Gamer Headquarters podcast. Lieutenant Colonel Ken Crigliano, your co-host.
Hi, I'm excited to be here on the Warrior Gamer podcast. My name is Dr. Jannell MacAulay. I spent 20 years in the United States Air Force, starting at the Air Force Academy, and then I'm a combat veteran, spent my career flying C-21s, C-130s, KC-10s, leading teams as a special operations consultant, and spent some time on the staff in the Washington, D.C. area across the course of my career. I'm a member now as a retiree of the WarriorGMR nonprofit board. And so I'm really excited to bring my experience as a military member, an operator, a leader, but also I have a PhD in the space of strategic health and human performance. So I'm really excited to share my education and research in the space of mindfulness and building the most effective human weapon system to execute high stress missions, whether that's still on active duty service, whether it's now with first responders, or as the pandemic showed us, almost everybody is kind of living in a high stress environment, to include anyone who's trying to balance like their passion for gaming and their military service together. And so I'm really excited to be a part of the foundation and to share my work in the space of proactive mental health strategies so that we can stay ahead of the adversity we face with mental wellness training and building mental strength. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys to talk about that and more.
We are and have been very excited for you to come because, as everyone just heard, I mean, your credentials are unparalleled and your experience is unparalleled as well. And those are two extremely rare traits to have, where you have someone who is academically experienced and accomplished and someone who is life experienced and accomplished. And so that to me makes superhumans. And all too often, we kind of go out in the world and we kind of see someone who's street smart, but maybe, doesn't do their taxes for 10 years or someone who, academically speaking. And so what we have here is a fantastic opportunity to talk on both sides of the spectrum and really to see kind of how both of those converge. And I'm very interested in why you actually joined the board. What did you see here? Because it's a fusion of both of your, academic accomplishments and your experience that gives you the judgment that you have. And I want to know exactly, or, relatively exactly, what did you feel that compelled you to join us?
Yeah, for sure. First, thank you for the superhuman comment. I'm going to kind of like ride that one out for the next couple of weeks. Some Thursdays, I definitely don't feel like a superhuman. But no, like you definitely nailed the uniqueness of my background, right? Having been an operator as well as a researcher and academic in the space of performance, does offer a unique perspective, right? I've lived it. I've led people in that space, but I've also studied it extensively. And the reason I agreed to join the WarriorGMR board, as well as be a part of this community, was kind of twofold. First, I will readily admit I am not a gamer. My kids are gamers, especially my son, but I am not a gamer. And I realize that the youth of today, like that is where they are, right? That is a space that they find passionate, like their passion and joy and, thriving for themselves. And so if I want to share my message and my research with that population, there is a sense of kind of like meeting them where they're at. And is there a way, because I've thought about this with my son, especially, seeing how passionate he is for games, and esports. It's how do I bring this knowledge and experience I have into that space so that it doesn't become like it, or not that it, let's use a positive instead of a negative, like so that it can become a space for mental health. right? Like not just like an escapism and then like the negative connotations of like being distracted by games and those things. How do we use it to our advantage to integrate skill sets and the good parts of what gaming can bring to our mental health, and how does that kind of interface? So that was fascinating to me. I wanted to learn more about it. And then I have a passion, I said twofold. The second piece was I really do have a passion for military members. And having been a leader and commander in the Air Force, like I do realize that esports is kind of like just going to continue to grow, especially with our military members. And so if I really want to continue to impact them, this was also a space to kind of learn more about. So it's kind of like, how do we integrate, my passion and my work with where our airmen are today?
So this is good. And I think April, you're gonna really chomp on this one. So as a mom, and someone who has operational military experience, not only leading folks, but being in a combat zone, and you've got your PhD, you did not mess around with time management. I mean, you had to dial all of that in for 20 years, probably straight. And if you're anything like me, I have like 100 days of leave. I don't even know when or where I can even take it because I'm doing everything. I don't have time for all that stuff. And so when you see your son and he's gaming and you have not been a big gamer, how do you allocate in your mind the value of what he's doing based upon your background? I guess based upon your background and your outlook. Very interested.
That is a great question. Well, I first and foremost will be transparent and honest. We set limits. I mean, he's 10, so there definitely are limits on when he can game, and how much time he does spend in front of his devices. I will say that I always ask my kids the same question, and because I want them to start thinking in this space of value added activities, right? So I do tend to say, is what you're doing value added to your experience, to your life, to your growth as a human being? And one thing that I think my son kind of taught me especially in his space of gaming, was that he's a military kid and he has had to move around a lot. And he keeps in contact with his friends through the space of gaming, which I don't think I understood the value in that at first. Like I kind of like my initial thought was like, you're just wasting your time, like playing these games. But then he started to kind of educate me on, well, I'm doing it with my friends, right? We're on the phone together, we're talking together, we're communicating, we're, in these spaces where we can keep these friendships alive. And so that was something that, I found myself really intrigued by, because it is true. It's hard on a kid's military life and having to make new friends. And so it's a way for them to stay connected. And I love that about it. But again, in all honesty, he doesn't get to game until we also have a policy. You do the things you need to do before the things you want to do. And gaming definitely is more on the want side of things. So homework and chores and those kinds of things. But he definitely finds, joy and passion in that space.
Okay, I'm gonna keep scratching at this one. So we have spent hours on this show talking about the benefits of gaming, and we've had some pretty incredible folks in here. And one of them, I mean, we have two incredible ladies, and April and I have gone back and forth on this because she's an educator and she watches these kids game and she sees the difference between kids that are gaming or youth that are gaming at a high level, those who are kind of gaming at like a leisure level, and those who don't at all. And I see it as well, not only as me as an Air Force officer as well, leading folks and those who game and all that, but in my own life. And so I'm interested to see your thoughts on the cognitive, personal, and physical benefits of the gaming that you've allowed your son or all of your kids, or, in particular your son, to partake in? And maybe in addition to that, professionally, what you may assume to be some of the benefits of gaming.
Well, I think there's, I don't have a lot of personal experience, but the one thing I will say is, flying like a simulator versus, flying the real aircraft. Like, we spend a lot of time in the simulator because it helps you fine tune the skill sets that you're going to need when you go out there and actually fly a plane in a high stress situation. Right. And you get to practice, right? Like the task management, you get to practice like the fine motor skills, that are required. You have to learn, right? Like a new system. And I kind of equate like all of those benefits and skill sets that I've developed in a simulator to be similar to, I think, what, like my son is learning when he's, gaming today, on his devices and in his environment. But it's the same thing. It's like, it is fine motor skills. It is like split second decision making many times. It is, strategy. We do play chess with him as well, because I think it's important for kids to understand the consequences of an action, right? Like, if I do this, then this is going to happen, right? Or maybe I should take that step back. What if I do this? Now, what are the next consequences or things that could happen? And I do think that that's another vital skill set for critical thinking and decision making, that can be benefits from that experience. I don't know. I would be really curious, April, like what your thoughts are on some of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing so much for us. Your background is amazing, and I'm just thrilled to have you here. We are one of the things that I'm really excited about. Our esports team, almost all of them play chess. And in 2020, the highest paid esports person earned $520,000 playing chess. And Twitch, now once dominated by all gamers, has so many chess streamers, you would not believe it. So there's definitely a lot of similarities in the gameplay. And I think one of the things, like to Ken's point, one of the things that I'm really, really proudest of my elite gamers, my college level gamers who go against other colleges, is how focused they are. How, they never miss practice. They never choose to slack off. And people think that often parents, no offense to the parents here, but often think they're slacking off when they're gaming, but they're actually doing research. They're actually reading. They're actually, they're collaborating with their friends and learning those skills that build confidence. They have to, in a split second, like you say, depending on the game, in a split second, they have to gain the trust of 5 other people or 4 other people, depending on the game, around them, and then act on that, like in a split second. Like that, like it's a digital landscape. Like in the past, we would say go outside and play, because outside gives you a whole landscape to explore. It's fantastic things to see and do. Now it's sort of go inside the digital world and play. Because there you'll find the biggest challenges. You'll find the best way to prove yourself. And I think that's one of the things that our gamers always say. I've done survey after survey for like 20 years, just trying to make sure I give them the best experience. My goal is to give our students the best experience in college. And over, I hear, I wouldn't have friends if I wasn't in this club. I wouldn't have, the connections. I wouldn't have got to travel. I wouldn't have met any of these people who are not the same color as I am, or not the same, background, not the same religion as I am. I would have never met any of these people except for the game. So I think that part of it that you don't really recognize is, if you are, like we're in Chicago, I'm in Chicago, very, very racially divided city, just because of redlining and all sorts of other things. But these kids who are playing games are from all over. So they have friends who are from all over, and that's very unique to this space. And I think that is breaking down the, the stereotypical problems that we used to have in a way that could have never happened without gaming.
I know movies can be a bit, cheesy, but if you look at some of the movies about kids being united across racial, ethnic, cultural backgrounds, it's usually something very similar to this. It's like a dance club, chess club, something like that requires focus, that it doesn't matter where you're from, that all you have to do is apply yourself, cooperative, right? I see every time I talk more about this, I see gaming becoming more and more like all these other things, like the dance club, the chess club, karate, soccer, these things that require cooperation, execution, and study. And I've been assigned to flying units, in particular, one that flew the same airframe as yours. I was a flying crew chief on an MC-130E a long time ago. And as an officer, I trained air crew as well. And I mean, the amount of studying that these people have to do, not only on the threats, but their own airframe. And I mean, just an immense amount of studying is precisely the same that these elite gamers have to do. If you want to drop into a game and survive, you have to do homework. And this is the most joy I get in this industry, is explaining to people how good these people are, how much time and energy and effort, and how competent and superhuman these gamers are is just unbelievable to me. And I've said this, I don't know, 10 times on this show, but I've been to the Olympics, I've been to multiple world championships, I've won at that level, and I have not seen talent equivalent to when I saw these gamers executing at nanosecond speed. I mean, it's just incredible. The amount of work I had to do to just simply survive in some of these games, homework, spreadsheets, and mathematical equations. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, thank you for that perspective, because I don't know that I would have thought that research, and study go into gaming, right? Like, I think the modern assumption is that it's just like repetitious play, right? Like, and there's probably a lot of value in that, right? Of learning, through that repetition. But, that's interesting to me, right? Now I'm going to have a better appreciation when my son's like, well, I'm on YouTube watching a guy playing a video game. And I'm like, why are you watching someone else playing a video game that is foreign to me? But you're right. Like, there's some study there too. New perspective.
Hey, also, I love that you said this, because I always tease this, which is, people say that, like, you're going to watch someone else play a game. Yeah. What did you do last Sunday? You watched someone play football. I mean, how is that weird? That's weird to me. Like, you're sitting watching someone else do physical activity, but these folks are studying. I mean, they're doing academic research. And I tell you, the number one thing I did, so I'm trying to make an esports team this year. I'm trying to be the first person to be on the Air Force sports team and an Air Force esports team. And I mean, I watched videos and I was like, how the hell did that guy I didn't even know that I was even physically capable of doing that in a game. And trying to like replicate, and Bilal's bebopping in. So
I can add while you're helping it. So one of the things that I find just fascinating is how fast our kids memorize the maps. So maps change just constantly, like the publishers. Video games are not like basketball where the court always looks the same. The maps change, locations change, the rules change, and they adjust. So it's one of the most amazing things that they're developing is, one, the ability to adjust quickly and use it. And then two, the ability to deal with failure, because they have to fail over and over and over again. And then they pick themselves up and they move on fast. And they do that, learning to fail fast is one of the biggest traits that an entrepreneur needs.
Absolutely. Okay, I do have to ask. Can I ask a quick question? Sure. Did my son call you ahead of time and pay you to try to convince me to let him game and watch more YouTube. Yeah, I have a quick story for you. He knows what I teach about. He's been to a couple of my speeches.
Did she freeze for you guys?
Yep.
Okay.
Is she frozen?
Yeah, let me pause.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Okay. No big deal. You're back. So
Internet
we were
looks
talking
like-
about the maps changing and your son paying me, which check is in the mail. So
Okay, check is in the mail. And it would be just like him at 10 years old to be able to. No, so I told him this story, or he and I were sharing about what he wanted to be when he grew up. We were in the car driving to school one morning, and he told me he wanted to be a YouTuber, like, or a game designer. And I was like, okay, well, I can kind of buy game designer, but YouTuber, Andrew, that's like a one in like a multi-million chance that you will be a successful YouTuber where you can like make money. And, and I'm going on and on about like, how about we have a real goal and vision for what we want to do in the future, and maybe like do YouTuber on the side, and maybe it'll become something. Like the car goes silent, right? And all of a sudden he just says, "Thanks for crushing my dreams, Mom." Don't you tell people in your speeches to like dream big, like see a vision for the future and like go for it? And I was like, oh.
To his point, one of the things he really could make, I've got a godson who at 11 have people sending him money through PayPal for esports coaching because he was so good at Fortnite. He really could be making,
Right.
I mean, he made $10,000 in a month doing that. And there's, on Patreon, they have people subscribe, and on Twitch, there's people who pay $5.90 or, $14.99, $4.99 every month just to watch them pay. So it to his point, he really could make a living doing this.
April, I think he paid you too. He must have gotten to both of you.
So this is the difference we make here, and I love that we're watching it real time, and we're welcoming Bilal too, our med student co-host, who brings an awesome perspective as well. And so what's really cool is I want to circle back just a few minutes on the statement that April made, which is put it in context. One of my good friends built a couple of the world's greatest of all time athletes. I mean, what this guy knows is an unbelievable. He says that his basketball athlete can get on the court with his total eyes closed. My buddy can put objects on the court, tell him, the player, where the objects are, blindfold the player, and the player can still sink all of the balls running around the court blindfolded because he's totally mapped the entire court in his mind. And so that's what it takes to get to that level. And those are just a few like variables. When you talk about a game, right, that has, we'll just talk about first person shooters because there's simply the most popular ones. The game developers do change the maps because the gamer's ability to master these things is unbelievable. Then they change the weapons. Then they change the physics. Like they'll literally change the physics in the game. They'll have this magic and all this stuff and different types of costumes and tools and uniforms that do different things. And each one of these gamers, if there's 10 different characters and each one has 10 different things and there's 30 different weapons, you understand the number of it. I mean, that's like 3,000 different combinations of things that they have to keep. And then the game changes. I mean, that's next level stuff. So just to kind of put that in a little bit of perspective, I mean, you had 3 airframes, which that's a lot. Okay, that's a lot for anybody. Can you imagine switching to fighter and then switching to like a submarine and then getting on a battleship? I mean, and the physics change. Now the battleship floats. I mean, that's pretty incredible stuff. I don't know if you had ever heard of that, but that's pretty amazing.
That's awesome. That's another perspective that maybe I just need to go play some of these games with my son one of these days. And then, yeah, okay. Well, have me on the podcast after I become a gamer.
Okay.
Absolutely. One of the things too, they say like the precision and distance, like some of the games that they hit these shots with. So like I know, there are folks in Texas driving drones, doing real, their interfaces are very similar to the interfaces that these kids are using.
Mhm.
And the precision with which they're hitting things, it's like someone gave an example. It's like if somebody in the farthest seat in the stadium at the baseball field is holding up a dime, these kids can hit it from the plate with consistency. And it's just unbelievable how much training takes to do that and do it over and over and do it and be reliable for that's the other thing, the way that they work together, their leadership, reliability, resilience. They don't miss their practices together. They show up for each other, because so when parents like come in and shut the computer off like during a game, they have no idea
Drama.
how traumatic that is.
So just yesterday, I was like, Andrew, it's dinner. Like, you got to get off your game. And he's like, but I can't right now. And I was like, no, just put yourself in like a hole or a tunnel or whatever. And like, get out of the game. It's time for dinner.
Yeah, traumatic experience. It can be. And like I played for the first time the competitive on Rocket League. First, I got owned. And second, like I couldn't leave it. I was like, all right, I'm done with this. I gotta go eat a sandwich. And it was like, sorry, you cannot leave competitive game. You'll be like, get a demerit. I was like, oh man. And my wife was like, you gotta get off this game, Ken. What are you doing? The kids need to be fed. Like, it's serious, for real.
Oh boy.
So I want to draw attention to Bilal's blanket because it's been in the works for like, gosh.
I heard about this blanket. Okay.
A little over a month, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. We got it like before Christmas, and I guess it got swept up in the Christmas. But those are all of the Warrior Gamer Foundation shirts that we had. We made them into a blanket with Project Repat, and they were really cool with us. And so now he has something really, because some of our feedback on the podcast was like, if he's gonna have a bed in the background, people at least like put something on there, put a big giant panda bear or in a medical suit, which we almost got a giant bear with a doctor's outfit, but we went with that one. So we'll make sure everyone sees that.
I like it. Good choice. Good choice.
Thanks for sporting it too, buddy. Appreciate that.
Of course, no problem.
Okay, so April, did you have, or Bilal, did you have any topics that you wanted to further bring up?
No, I did not.
I did, because I'm so excited you're here. The studies that you're doing, I'm really interested in. I was telling Bilal I'm working on my PhD right now. My comprehensive exam is coming up at the end of March. And,
it's a marathon, not a sprint. Just remember that. PhD work.
As you're interacting with people, bringing out the best in them, and this is what I've talked to Ken about a lot too, that that gaming brings out the best in so many people, that it's the real purpose is to practice that emotional interaction. So I've got kids who are first time in this country, couldn't hardly speak at all this language, but as soon as they're on one of our teams, they have a reason to speak a lot. Before they were shy, before they were reserved. So how would you go about using what you're studying to build confidence and to build that superhuman, as Ken was saying?
So, relying on a lot of the research in the area of like how we generate confidence, how we do hard things, step up to challenge. There's no doubt that experience and knowledge and skill development all build our confidence to do something we may have never done before, right? And I kind of equate this whole idea to, like, have you ever done something and you weren't quite sure you could do it when you started off, and then you accomplished it? And do you remember what that feeling was like? Right? Like the feeling to get to the other side of something that in your head, you were like, I'm not 100% sure this is going to go my way. It feels really amazing on to celebrate that. And that's something that I think human beings crave, right? They crave the feeling of on the other side of challenge. However, in today's world, we have so many things, I call them like the mental barriers, that are going to stop us from like stepping out into an uncertain environment and trying something new, right? Because there's all these things that come at us that tell us we're not good enough. We can't do that. You've never done that before, right? You're an imposter. Like, you don't have the skill sets. You're not prepared, whatever it is, right? That kind of pops into our head, and those narratives that keep us out of the moment, right? And inside what I call like the iPod of our mind, right? Catastrophizing about the future and ruminating and regretting over the past. And so where confidence really comes from the research is when confidence is generated in a high pressure moment. So you're being asked to like play the game, or you're in the game and having to make those split second decisions. Like when I study confidence, is like, how do we get confidence in those moments so that we can rise to the occasion and the challenge? And what we found from the research is that confidence comes from one place only, and it's credible self-talk, right? It's what do you say to yourself in that moment will either generate the confidence you need to step forward and take a chance and take a risk, or to hold you back and hesitate. And so we call it credible self-talk because that's where the knowledge and the experience and, the study comes into play, right? I can't just tell myself anything I want. Like, sure, you can make this basket when it's the game-winning free throw of the championship basketball game when I never practice free throws, right? Like that's not credible self-talk. But if I practice my free throws and I've built up that experience, then I can say to myself in that moment, this is just like any other free throw. I've got this, right? And it's the same thing, like I think for, people who are in different environments and they want to take a risk, or while you're playing a game and it's an intense situation, you have to build upon your breadth of experience and say, maybe I've never done this thing before, but I've done X, Y, or Z. Here's my background that allows me in this moment to have the credibility to use that self-talk to build the confidence I need to succeed. So yeah, like it's a very powerful concept. And if you don't have, and like what I teach people is to have like a confidence mantra or an epic thought, like something that they can redirect their mind to when those doubts start piling in, because our brains, right, will automatically search, like they're designed for survival, right? We want to search for threats. And so if we're doing something challenging, we're going to like think about all the things that could go wrong in that moment. And so if you don't train your mind to go to a different place, like toward a confidence building statement, it'll be really difficult to rise to the challenge. So, that's what I would say to help those students that struggle in that space, because some people are more natural at developing these skill sets than others. But if they struggle, it could be just the sheer fact of helping them rely on their experience to build a credible statement to say to themselves when they're facing challenge.
That is fantastic. And I would argue that our esports students versus and I haven't done the research on this yet, but to what you just said, they put themselves in that challenge mode far more often than anybody else. They, just like our athletes on the basketball field, on the lacrosse team, on the field hockey team, those are, they play once every few, maybe twice a month against someone else. Our esports kids are playing every night against somebody. And the heightened emotion is real. People tell me gaming's not real. I'm like, you haven't seen gamers if you think gaming is not real. The heightened emotion, how much they care, how, what they want to overcome is very, very real. And I think that's why they have so much confidence, because they do it over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, they're building up that credibility, right? To kind of try something new and do a new challenge or try a new game or go to a new level they haven't attempted before and have the right narrative inside their head to like help them accomplish those tasks. Yeah, it's very similar, I think, to this idea of like looking at things with an optimistic lens as well. Like the more you fail and know you'll be okay, right? Like because you've done it before and you're like, it wasn't the end of the world. Like the more you'll shift your really it's your psychological framework that either can see the world with an optimistic lens or more pessimistic or hopeless lens. And we know from the studies and the research, like the more you practice failing and then like getting up and seeing that there's generally, even when things are bad, something good still will happen. And the more you practice that, the more you can also be optimistic in those types of scenarios. So, yeah, the one difference in a lot of the people I work with, and you brought this up too, I mean, lives are on the line, right? Like you fly a plane in combat, like your life is on the line. There's other people's lives on the line, which inherently offers a heightened sense of pressure, right? Attached to these moments. But what I found in the work that I do is that I can be in the carpool lane at school, dropping my kids off and feel like it's life or death, right? Like I could be like, kids are bickering, I'm hitting every red light, I'm late. And I could really feel like the pressure is the same that I would feel in a combat zone getting shot at. So, right, it's all our perception of the stress we're feeling in any given moment.
Oh, that's fantastic.
This is really good because that was a big nugget that you just dropped for our folks. And, people can go years without hearing those things. And so I just want to reiterate that on credible self-talk is the prerequisite for confidence. In the building blocks of credible self-talk, you put knowledge, experience, and study, right, are necessary. I'm sure there could be some other components of that. And you said, some good tricks are a mantra, which Tony Robbins is very famous for using that word, epic self-talk as well. And so part of my book series is trying to shorten the knowledge gap between the greatest people on the planet and the most vulnerable populations, because it's just access to that knowledge, to techniques and tactics and the tricks that really make the difference. And so when people understand that, hey, in order for me to have confidence, which we're teasing of success, right? Like I want to get to where I'm trying to get to where I want to be. Well, in order to get there, I need confidence. In order to get confidence, I need credible self-talk. Well, how do I do that? Well, you got to live it a little bit, maybe have a mantra. And so what you're teasing at with the mantra and the self-talk is, we talked about this, I think, on the first couple episodes. Your brain doesn't know if you've actually done it or not if you have a memory of it. And so you have these things called mirror neurons. When you watch someone else do something, your same neurological pathways fire and they reinforce, making those paths of least resistance. So you can literally become a better runner by watching other people run, especially, well, they got to have good form, right? I do this on a daily basis, folks. It is 100%. And so when you have the self-talk, your brain and your body thinks it's actually happening, and you're reinforcing those neural pathways, which is part of that knowledge, experience, and study for that self-talk. And you also said the more you practice. And so you don't have to necessarily do everything physically. There's been multiple studies, one in Chicago, it was very famous, University of Chicago study on athletes doing workouts in their mind only versus athletes who did them physically versus athletes who did nothing at all. And some athletes who did it in their mind only were actually better than some of the athletes who did it physically. These are shooting free throws, by the way, on the University of Chicago basketball team. Very famous study. And so there's a way that if you don't know how to get to the path or to the goal that you want, you can fake it to make it. And so a very big trick, and I'll shorten this as much. A big trick that me and my family does, you can see all of this, and I've thrown away 99% of my awards and trophies, is we print out these fake announcements. and their news reports, and we put Fox or we put whatever we want. I don't care about their logos. I'm using it and I'm putting it around my house. I put it on the refrigerator. I make a backdrop for my computer. I put it all over this stuff. I'll even have shirts made or hats made of what I want to happen in the future. I don't care. I'm going to do it, right? I just want as much immersion because my brain doesn't know the difference. I also create music and videos with music that show me doing the thing that I'm about to do. And I try to make it as realistic and immersive. If it's a certain venue, I get video from that venue. If I've been there before doing that event, I'll recycle that imagery and I have me, congratulations, Air Force Ken, first place. And so I really wanted to kind of draw out that comment that you made, that there are a lot of tricks that people use to get that knowledge, experience, and study and that confidence as well. I'm interested to know if you had come across some of those in some of your studies, and if not, or if so, what you thought about them.
Well, for sure, the visualization piece. I mean, from my flying career, we chair fly, right? Like you chair fly and you go through in your mind, like, I'm going to go through these steps of the checklist. And then I see myself taking off and I see myself like flying the low level or whatever it is. Because there is power in that repetitious visualization. So completely am supportive of that kind of research. Additionally, what we can do with visualization, which I think is interesting because you take it even to like that next level of, actually printing out visual cues for yourself to be constantly reminded of what I would call vision setting, right? Like, can you set a vision for yourself as to like, why are you putting up with a hard thing, right? Like, that's what I think people get stuck on a lot of times. They're like, they enroll at, say, like, I'm an Air Force Academy grad, not an easy college to go to, right? So you go to the Air Force Academy and it's hard. And you're like, I didn't expect it to be this hard. Or you go to medical school and you're like, it's hard. I'm getting a PhD. This is hard. And so our mind and the world we live in today, we're highly distracted. We tend to have all these narratives in our heads because of the stress we experience. And it's very easy to get derailed off of your goals and your vision when things get hard. And so what vision setting does for us is that you have a vision for why you started, right? Like, I went to the Air Force Academy because I envisioned myself being a pilot someday, right? Like flying planes, doing amazing things and serving my country. Like, why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to get your PhD? Whatever that vision is for yourself, then you attach imagery to it, right? And so in a lot of the workshops I teach, we take the individuals through an imagery where they close their eyes, they take like those, kind of calm their breathing, and then they see themselves like in pursuit and accomplishing that vision, right? Like, I can see myself flying an airplane. What do I see? Who's with me? What do I smell? What do I, like hear in that moment? I set all those images, right? Like in my mind. And then what do I feel? Right? Like, what do you feel in that moment? Because feelings are transformational, right? Like, we could set an image, but really where we get the transformation is through the feeling. And so I can see myself being a pilot and I feel proud, right? And I feel capable and confident and all the things I want to be. I feel badass. And so when I'm at the Air Force Academy and I'm like, this sucks and I don't want to be here, I have someplace to go. Like, I have an anchor to be like, this is why I'm doing this. This is temporary because this is where I'm going. And so you just take it one step further by having actually the visual cues around you so that you can actually be, and it's probably subliminal too, right? Like, you just walk past it and you don't even have to acknowledge it, but you're like, I gotcha. That's on my vision board, or that's what, I'm aiming for. So
that's
very
right. I even
Ken's
took
a
my
ninja warrior.
Yeah, I will be.
He really is. He's
a couple more weeks. For Ninja Warrior, I had my son record the video for my application, and then I took the video and I cut it up, and then I put him on this chair with the mic, and I said, "Look, buddy, just motivate Daddy," and he went 15 minutes on the mic, like, Daddy, you can do this. I know you can do this. He just went off, and I recorded like from his side and here the video, and I took it and I overlaid all my favorite workout music on top of it, and I did the volume so that I could hear his words, but like they weren't overwhelming, that my subconscious was doing it. And so I go to the gym and I'm just like, yeah, I know exactly what this is for right now. Like, this is gonna hurt and I'm gonna love it, because when I go and I show up, like, this is gonna pay dividends. And I wish that the normal public knew all of this, because it would be so much easier for them to simply, I mean, there's so many people that's just trying to feed their kids, Yeah. And here I am trying to not face plant on a TV show. It's a big difference. And I wish, like, we're trying through this show and through our books, in your motivational speaking, in your presentations, in your performances, in your research. I mean, we're all trying to do it. And I just wish that some of these techniques were a little bit more, available to the regular folks. But it's really cool, everything you're saying. Bilal, what are they teaching any of this stuff in school yet? Or are you going to be the guy to do it?
I'm hoping to be the guy to do it. They don't really teach it so much, more so they kind of remind you every now and then, oh, hey, here's what you need to do to kind of get yourself back on track. But it's usually just like a quick, aside. They don't sit you down and say, okay, what's going on? Why are you doing this, right? Unless something serious is happening and you need immediate intervention. This is definitely a missing technique. I think the question I have is, why isn't it taught? Oh, where do you think that discrepancy comes from? Because I don't understand. If this skill is as useful as we say it is, then why doesn't the public know about this?
I would say, from my perspective, it's twofold. The first part is we have stigmatized across our culture, I think, this ability as human beings for kind of connection and proactive mental health training, right? Like, and then on top of it, we've layered all of this intense distraction and stress and overwhelm and social media, like pressures of like judgment and being less than and keeping up and all of that, right, has compounded to a culture where, it's just seen as weak to pause, right? It's seen as weak to like do something like train your mind, or the misperception is, well, that's what you do when you need help, right? You don't do that to be a higher performer. Like, you do these other things, like you work hard and you focus on like repetitively practicing your craft and training your body. Like, those are things, because they're things you could visually see, right? Like, I can fly my plane repetitively and I see that I'm training that. I can work out my body and I see the changes. But when I tell you, you need to do mental push-ups, and that means sitting quietly and creating space for yourself, like, we're still, I think we're making progress towards seeing that as value added. But I think we're still a little in the stigmatized pocket of our culture today. So that's, I think, the first part. And the second part is like treating it like it's not not a performance-based tool, right? We only treat it like, will you go to the doctor when you need help because you're broken? I know, especially in the military, that's like, we put performance in the medical career field, right? Like, the performance centers were run by the doctors and like the exercise physiologists and people who have no operational experience and can't contextualize what performance is. And so if you're an operator, you're like, I'm not going to the doc, right? Like, I'm going to just like there's nothing wrong with me. Like, I'm just, and once you admit there's something wrong with you, then you go to the doc to get these skill sets. And that's where the bulk of my work has been transitioning. First, this destigmatizing the idea of what training your mind really looks like, and that it's a proactive strategy, just like training your body and training your craft, right? We add training your mind as the third piece. And then the second part of it is bringing it into leadership and culture as a performance tool that, oh, by the way, also offers mental prehab for resiliency and well-being, but it's mainly a performance tool. Like, do you want to be a badass? Do you want to be like a superhuman? Like, this is the pathway, body, craft, mind. And that's all career fields, I would say too, not just the military, like healthcare, like it's you're weak if you need sleep, which is like a human thing. Like, you can't be expected to sit like multiple 24-hour shifts and not be suboptimal. Like, you're suboptimal. Like, that's like a fact when you don't get sleep. So we're just trying to fight against the culture. And then, that's the first piece. And then once you win that battle, you have to use the right messaging to then integrate it appropriately.
I want to know where this stigma, and I think like your answer is really good. And I have answered this to so many people. And my answers typically is Henry Ford with the assembly line, right? I mean, we live in a square culture, a box, where we sleep in a box. Our house is a box. Our car is a box. We eat box cereal. Everything is this box. You think inside the box, sit down in school, shut up, don't talk back, don't think, don't daydream, don't do anything. And I think this assembly line culture bled over into our academics, right? And our school system, where our kids, are not rewarded for daydreaming. But meanwhile, the greatest people on the planet are the greatest daydreamers ever. And a lot of them did horribly in school. I mean, you think about the three big, huge companies doing incredible, amazing stuff right now, where you have Tesla, right? You have Virgin Atlantic, you have Amazon. All three of them are led by guys that flunked, I know Richard Branson can barely read, and we all know about some of the other mental physiological and mental conditions that some of the other ones have talked about. And so it's like, that's where I tell people is, I think we just got into this, like, you need a physical output for a physical input. Otherwise, we don't understand what you're doing here.
Well, and there's a scheduling piece too. Like, I think Wayne Gretzky talked about it, where the way he got to be great at hockey was because he just loved to play. And he played without rules and without structure. And that actually develops a better player. And our youth today are so overscheduled, so overstructured. They don't have the space to think freely or to be creative or to daydream, right? Or we're so stressed out. Here's the other way our minds work. 50% of your day, you're not paying attention to what's going on. Like, your mind is like a flashlight, right? Or your attention system, right? It can be focused on what's going on out here, or it gets focused on our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And when that flashlight of our attention system gets stuck internally, like, we're not paying attention to what's going on. And that happens by the research, actually 46.9% of our waking moments. And so we could be daydreaming, like thinking through a problem. And then all of a sudden your mind starts thinking about what you said yesterday at the meeting that was so embarrassing, and that what you think other people think when you took that risk this morning and asked a question, and and then all of a sudden you catch yourself. It's like reading a page in a book and you're like, I don't even remember what I read. You unintentionally go on to the iPod of your mind. It's like our minds are fantastic at mental time travel. It's all wasted space. So we don't even get to daydream because we start mind wandering toward our worries when we're trying to be creative. So yeah, it's a big problem.
You mentioned play, and the value of play reels right back into esports.
There you go. I know, right? You're right. It is. It's a way to be creative, right? And you have control, and you can think strategically, so yeah, there definitely is a lot of value in that. So,
but
yeah.
Do you think that I tend to think that is the greatness of humanity, is that not only do we forget things and we make up things, right, which makes us creative, and our memories are very pliable. Every time you think of one, you change it, you put it back in differently, right? Do you think that like half of your day you're just kind of like not paying attention allows our brains to kind of like cook up recipes and visions of things that are not in front of us, of the things that we're paying attention to, that perhaps maybe we just got to learn to better focus that one or influence it maybe?
So I think you're confusing two terms, and this is totally common. There's a difference between daydreaming and mind wandering. And the phrase mind wandering has been used to say, just let your mind wander free. And, like while you're in the shower, just let it go where it's going to go. And maybe your brilliant idea will come to you. That's actually daydreaming. Daydreaming is kind of letting your mind freely think. Mind wandering is when you have an ongoing task or activity. I am telling my brain to pay attention to where I'm driving, and it unintentionally goes off course, and I'm not aware that it's happening. So then I get to my destination. I think, oh my God, I don't remember how I got here. Right? That's not necessarily daydreaming. That's mind wandering because I have an off-task thought. Now, the problem is in the research is that those off-task thoughts tend to be negative thoughts, right? Like when our mind is left to go in a space where we're telling it to do something and it goes off on its own, it tends to go towards our stressors, our worries, or catastrophes. When we intentionally say, oh, I want to think through a problem, I'm just going to let my mind be free. And then we start thinking about our worries, we mind wander when we try to daydream. So daydreaming is a very productive place and intentional. Mind wandering is an unproductive and unintentional space for our brain to go. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. I have to keep muted because I'm sick. So I definitely want to pull that thread because I'm ultra focused right now on my big goals for this year. And I know that to prohibit myself from mind wandering, I need to be very focused on certain goals. And I visualize them, I immerse myself in them as we talked about. And so when a mind wandering occasion occurs, it's actually quite structured where it's like, okay, you said you were going to do this thing this week. You haven't done it yet. When can you fit it in? And then my mind comes back. I notice that when I'm disciplined in a vision, in a goal, and I visualize it and I think about it intentionally, that those occasions of mind wandering tend to be more productive. Is that, do you think that there's some shared space there between the daydreaming and the mind wandering, where if I exercise control more in the conscious aspect and let my mind wander on things that I could do, or let daydream about things I could do, that my mind wandering tends to help me like execute those things at all?
Well, the idea is, do you do it with or without awareness? Right? Like when your thoughts go toward like take you out of the moment and redirect in a way that you're, it's like the page in a book, sometimes you have to go back 3 pages and realize this is actually where I stopped paying attention. I had no awareness for 3 pages that I wasn't paying attention. That's mind wandering, right? What I think you're talking about is like when you have like a clear vision and goal, can you daydream toward that goal? Yes, absolutely. But that's like kind of like an awareness, like you're telling your mind it can go wherever it wants. Like I'm not doing something right now that I need to be completely focused on, or maybe you are, but the goal can help your like lessen your mind wandering and increase and improve your daydreaming. That is definitely
this is like I'm driving down the road and the last 5 miles I don't remember anything, but I came up with a kick-ass idea how to increase my grip strength on my pinky or whatever. Like that's kind of what I'm thinking.
And then that is a daydreaming space. Like it's not from a space of worry and stress and like catastrophizing. It's more from a productive space of like, I'm driving and I'm going to take some deep breaths and like let my mind kind of daydream towards some productive thinking. Like the other problem with this that helps delineate between the two is the noise inside our heads, right? Like, is the noise inside our heads something like, you have this goal. What are you doing to get yourself there? I'm going to daydream toward ideas to get myself there. That's productive, right? Is the noise inside my head, you suck, you're never going to get there. And oh, by the way, you got in a fight with your spouse yesterday and she's pissed off and this is happening in your life and you said something to a friend and then you don't pay attention to where you're driving, right? Like those aren't productive. That's just noise. And so when I train people on mindfulness, mindfulness is a filter, right? Like mindfulness and taking those deep breaths helps us disconnect from the thoughts inside our head. So then we can consciously choose which ones are helpful and productive for us. So like, I like this quote that Steven Spielberg had. Someone asked him, like, did you know that Jaws was going to be like this amazing hit? Like it just hit you in the head one day that like, you need to make Jaws. It's going to be amazing. And he said, no, it came in a whisper. Like it was like this intuitive whisper that like, this is an idea. Like I should execute it. And if he listened to all the things coming at him, those weren't the good ideas. It was the ones that he could hear once he silenced the noise. So I think that's where mindfulness provides the value into getting to what you're after, I think.
Yeah, I love that because there was this book, and I don't even remember what it was, but it was a woman author who talked about all her books that she's written on how they came to her in like this little, like through the wind, and the ones she didn't execute, someone else wrote, and they were really good. And she's like, I really think that like when you're focused, you're in tune with the universe, and the universe like gives you little hints, or maybe someone thinks about something, or maybe 10 people think about them, and you're just in that wavelength and you got to act. And like, I subscribe to that. Like that's a great quote, because I write this stuff down. I have like a draft email in my Gmail, and I go and I write it all down, and I've seen people do the things that I've written in there because I never acted upon them. And I think that's a really good way to put it, that I think would help people too. Like, hey, you gotta, even the greatest people on the planet are just get like a little whisper of some of the greatest things that they've ever done.
Yeah.
It's super
and my question to people is always like, do you have too much noise in your head that you're not hearing your whispers, right? Like, what are you missing out on? Because you're just listening to the, like, I can't, I won't, like judgments, like expectations, stressors and distractors. Yeah.
One of the things George Lucas said when he finished Star Wars, arguably one of the greatest, most impactful, fantastic films, he said it was only 30% of what he expected. If you listen to the interviews back from the 70s, he was not at all joyful and happy about it. And still to this day, he's not at all joyful and happy about it. So I think there's room for joy and giving yourself a break. And I say this to Ken because I'm not military. My mother was in the Marine Corps, but I'm not. And I think that people who are going through that experience don't give themselves enough breaks. Don't just say, okay, it's gonna be okay. Let me just give myself a break.
Pause. Like people don't understand that like the special ops mentality is slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? Like slow down for a minute and your great idea might come to you like in that space.
Yep. And I know we had to wrap it up. And my last comment here, and I know Bilal and April, we've talked about this, but and it just hits on what you just said, is success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And so I know that there are many people who are famous who died by suicide, took their own lives, attempted to, but were some of the greatest people and some of the most loving, caring, and giving. But you have to always take a step, take a knee, and be fulfilled and be filled with joy by the successes, even no matter how small they are in life. And I'll leave you with that. And anyone else, April, if you want to chime in as we let our wonderful guests go on to her daughter's lacrosse awesomeness.
And that just shows her work-life balance, and I think that's just fantastic. And thank you so much for being with us. You taught me a lot and everyone listening, I'm sure.
Well, I learned a lot too from all of you, so thank you so much. And my son's check will be in the mail. I'm gonna have to go talk to him and be like, all right, buddy, I have a new perspective on your gaming.
What's his game, by the way? What's he play?
Andrew. His name is Andrew. He He plays a lot of Roblox. He plays some Fortnite.
Nice.
He plays Minecraft.
Classics.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So
Mm.
he's, still in that beginning stages of figuring out, just the basics of gaming. So
Guy's a strategic tactician like
And
his mom. So
yes.
Mhm.
And he has, what is also, he loves this like stick war something. He's like always like, Mom, this is a strategic game. Right. Or like Plants versus Zombies. They're like, this is strategy.
It is. It is. I agree.
That's fantastic. People
Yeah.
recreated Middle Earth in Minecraft, so there's nothing basic about Minecraft if you put your mind to it.
amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know he's always showing me, look what I created. So anyway, no, this has been such a privilege to chat with you guys tonight and learn more about your space. And I'm glad I was able to share a little bit about the work that I do as well.
Shared
Thank
thought
you.
here and much appreciation, gratitude, doctor, and enjoy your night. And we'll have you back sooner rather than later, I'm sure.
Awesome. And good luck on American Ninja Warrior. I'm going to be looking out for you.
Rock on. Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.